So here's some good, we talk about sales, we often talk about objections. Why don't they buy? What are the things going on for them that will make it easy for them to say no versus them wanting to say yes? Why don't they buy? Probably one of the main ones is confusion. If they don't know what you're asking, what you're offering, if they don't know the parameters of that, the detail, some people like details more than others, like those terms and conditions. If they feel overwhelmed, most people are feeling really stressed. They've got a lot going on, both in their work life and their home life. Most people are overscheduled. So when you're thinking of these conversations, they're already kind of coming from that place of stress in the background. So make sure that you're kind of pacing your conversation to the person. Some people talk really fast. They like information quickly. Some people tend to talk a little bit more medium pace, or some people tend to talk a little more slowly. So you can kind of match what you're saying to the person, which makes it more comfortable for them. And also that's kind of from the NLP, the brain styles, whether people are that fast pace, or whether they're medium, or whether they're a little slower. So there's more information about that. And so just that idea is matching your content to the person. Do they want details? Do they want big picture? Are they talking fast, which means they're going to want information quickly? Or are they wanting a little slower pace that they kind of want to digest what you're talking about? Why don't they buy? If it's not the right fit. Remember, my parameters for buying a car. I knew what I wanted. I knew what those parameters were, and the car sales guy wasn't recognizing what he had to offer was not the right fit. So knowing that distinction, what is a good fit for you as a client versus what would you refer? What would you find, send them another resource for? If people don't know where to start, so we want to make sure that our conversation is clear about what the next step is. What is that next step? We'll be talking about this a little bit more. Maybe you're not asking for the sale right off. Maybe you're saying, hey, watch this 90-second video. Remember, most people are overscheduled, so keeping it short and clear and concise. Or, hey, is it okay if I send you a quick introduction? What is that next step, right? Why don't they buy? They're afraid it won't work, or that it won't work for them. I run into this a lot with the weight loss programs that I run, because people are they've tried so many things and it hasn't worked. You might even think about your industry. What are the places that people are worried about, that it won't work for them, the product won't work for them, or the service won't work for them, or they're getting taken advantage of in some way. People get afraid of that. If it sounds too hard. So what is their commitment? What is their expectation? What can they expect? And how can you kind of dial it in to make it easy for them? So if it requires too much, then they might not trust themselves to go through that process. And of course, if it doesn't fit their budget. But as we're going to talk about, budget and pricing is not always the first determiner, the priority about whether people are willing to work with you or not, or whether they're buying from you or not. So think about your industry. Think about what those objections are for people. This kind of goes back to your ideal client. What are they thinking in their head? What's their agenda? What's their priorities? And what are they looking for versus what they're trying to avoid or stay away from, right? And you can look at both of those sides in the sales process. What do they want versus what are they wanting to avoid? So looking at your industry, maybe there are certain places where people are dropping the ball in your industry. A great example of this is website designers. You can have amazing website designer, and if they're flaky or not reliable or responsible, it doesn't do you any good because they're not finishing your website, right? I had one web guy who didn't get my website done for like a year. And that's a long time to be waiting on that. So someone comes in and says, hey, I'm the web person that you can rely on. Yes, now they already have a step up because of the reputation in their industry for that. So that's a good place to recognize, okay, where can you kind of identify where you're more reliable, more trustworthy, more on time in your industry that can give you a step up. Where are the problems in your industry that you can address or do better? Of course, there's the personal connection. We, as humans, a lot of our stuff is going online, but we still we are geared, we are wired to be social. And we like to work with people who we know, like, and trust. And so those know, like, and trust factors are kind of part of, well, they really are part of that sales conversation. So keeping that in mind, feeling comfortable in socializing and connecting with people. Personal services, especially in that sales conversation, people are really prioritizing know, like, and trust factors. Of course, services often, it's that personal connection, coaching, NLP. We're really kind of getting, people want to feel really comfortable with you. Often they're giving you information that they haven't told other people. So that confidentiality is really important. They want to know that you're going to keep their trust and their confidence. Sometimes people are objecting to the price because they need to check with a spouse or a partner, which I'm not a fan of making people buy on the spot. I want them to feel really good about what they're purchasing and what they're, if they're moving forward in a program with me, I want them to feel really good about that and really clear about that. So I don't have a lot of refunds. I think I had one last year. Weighing benefits versus cost. So this is automatically in their mind, they're looking for, okay, they want the benefits, and is it worth the cost or worth the pricing of it, the price point? Often they're looking at factors of time versus money, but money and cost is not always the determining factor for someone. Cheaper is not always better. I am willing to pay more for a good pair of shoes rather than buying a $10 or $20 pair of shoes that's going to fall apart on me, right? So we want to kind of think about your industry. What is it that people are valuing? What are some of these important or prioritizing factors within your industry, and how can you illustrate that maybe you're doing something a step up within your industry? What people are really looking for is, what is the value? What is the benefit that they get in having the problem solved versus, money may not be the priority, the prioritizing issue. Okay, so here's a good thing to get you started is think about mapping your sales process. So now, because we have digital communications, we're actually getting communications inquiries from multiple places. So I suggest creating a map of each place that you get an inquiry. And that process may sound a little different from each avenue. So one place online, it often starts with the website. Are people signing in to get a free report? Are they signing in to get some information from your website? On my website, I think I might still have a free consult that is up. People can schedule a time to call and chat with me to find if they're a good fit. Referral, are people calling because of word of mouth? If they're calling because of word of mouth, what do they already know about you or don't know about you? So that would be a different conversation than if people are coming from your website. If you're looking at, now I get people who come in for a session because they're buying from other places. And so they're coming in to try out a session. So in the session, either online, web conferencing, or in person, that's kind of where I have my sales conversation. We talk about what their needs are versus what their budget is versus what program or package is the best fit for them. Email. I get people through email inquiry. They want to know, what's the next step? Are you taking new clients? What can I expect? What's your process like? How does it work? Not everybody wants to know how it works, but for some of us that are kinesthetically oriented. That's an NLP term. More about that processing. We want to see how things kind of fit together. And so we're interested in how it works, but not everybody is interested in that. Most people are looking for that step one is, what is the benefit? What is the benefit in your product or service? What problem does it help take care of? So I suggest thinking of the different places you're getting inquiries, or the places you want to get inquiries, whether it's the cold call conversation, whether it's word of mouth, whether it's following up on warm leads. And for each one, kind of map those specifically. So here's kind of how mine looks. The sales conversation, that invitation, the first contact, that would be from our last screen. Are they coming from the website, from a phone call, from a referral? And in that first contact, that's where you want to bring your service attitude, how you care, your sincerity, your authenticity. So that's a lot about how you're showing up. What is that frame of mind that you're coming from? And then there's the initial conversation. That dialing in, what are the problems that you solve? What can you help? How are your services or product going to help the person, going to help make their life better? Another cough attack. And that initial conversation, that's usually where people want to know, what's your process like? Maybe how your service or product is different from someone else in the industry. What is it that you're doing better or differently? And then that last frame is, what is the next step? What is that easy first step that people can take with you? Is it signing into, is it getting a free report? Is it finding out more information? Is it learning about the industry, or how you can, maybe an estimate or a proposal? Often in our culture, people also have the try before you buy, especially if they haven't tried it before. It's kind of like the samples that they put out at the grocery store. People want to try something before they're taking a risk with it. So is there a way to give them an easy introduction, an easy first step, making it easy for people to say yes? The irresistible offer. I've also heard this called the loss leader. So it's kind of some way that you're not fully valuing maybe a product or service, like a free consultation, that people can have that initial conversation with you. Even though you might be losing money on the initial thing, then it gives you that, it gives the person that try before you buy experience, but you can also have that sales conversation. So a good example of that for my business, I do offer a Groupon. So Groupon, they're creating like 50% off. Some of that money goes to Groupon, so I get a small bit of that. But if people are willing to purchase a Groupon, they tend to be more reliable because they've actually paid money for a session versus a free session. And I'll be talking about that in a minute. So in that initial contact, step it back. So in that initial conversation or contact, we really want to find more information about that client, that customer, that prospect, where they are, what they're looking for. And the more you can kind of get that information out of them, then you know how to move that conversation along. So we're going to just take the example of someone calling me by phone. I want to know, okay, how did you find me? That helps me recognize where my marketing is working and where I'm getting leads from. Oh, I'm getting leads from online, or so-and-so referred me. Then I have a little bit of background, both for my marketing, but also a little bit of the information about what they already know about me, right? So then get more information from the website versus if a friend referred them. And then I might ask, well, have you tried NLP or hypnosis before, and how was that experience for you? So this allows people, sometimes people have had a bad experience with hypnosis and they want to try someone else to see if it might be better, if it might work differently for them. Sometimes they haven't had the experience at all, in which case they need a little more background information about that process to feel comfortable with it. So something I often say to address that objection or that underlying fear is therapeutic hypnosis. There isn't the blanking out or not remembering like you might see on a stage show. It's more about using relaxation and focus techniques to give your automatic mind, your unconscious mind, some new ways to focus to help you think differently, feel differently, so that you can move forward. So that usually addresses, oh, okay, they're willing to try it out and see if it works for them. Also, in that initial conversation, you want to find out what their problem points are. Where are their pain points? In different industries, these are going to be in different ways. Like I mentioned, the website design person, my last designer just didn't get the project finished, or I've heard about that as a complaint in the construction industry. So think about where are their problem points, their pain points. And often that question in my conversation sounds like, well, what would you most like to change? What would you most like to make a shift in your life? The more that you can describe their problem, the more they see you as an expert. So, well, I might say depression can come from multiple areas. It can come from the mind ruminating on the past, what we didn't do right, what didn't go right. It might be from the mind thinking about our past disappointments. Sometimes depression is that our mind is projecting our past disappointments into the future. So then we might feel less hopeful about the future, even hopeless about the future. So there's like multiple brain habits that then relate to that problem. And if you can illustrate what these pain points are in their problem or describe that, people will recognize your expertise in that area, that industry. In my initial conversation, often people want to know, how does a session work? What's your process? So we talk about, okay, you come in, the first few minutes, we talk about where things are for you in your life, what you'd like to change and improve. And then we identify, and I specifically focus on the brain habits behind the problem. So if you're just not feeling motivated, there's a set of brain habits that make it worse. There's a set of brain habits that make it better. So what do we need to identify that your brain is running in the background, that we can create that roadmap of the mental blocks that need to change. And then usually in that initial process, that initial session, we have enough time to record to start the change work for you, whether it's recording a short hypnosis process or taking you through a neuro-linguistic programming experience to help the mind shift worry or anxiety or those fear patterns. And then the invitation. Now my invitation sounds like, well, now that you know what the process is like, would you like to go ahead and schedule the initial assessment? And some people will say, no, I have to check some things, I'll call back. But more often than not, I get people that say, yeah, I want to try it out and see how it works for me. So kind of thinking about that process. What's the information you're collecting on that initial conversation or contact? How can you relate or describe their problem? What's the process that you're going through? Whether it's the sales process or their experience with your product or service. Those would both be good conversations to kind of line out. And then what's your sales invitation? What does that sound like? You can see that this question is just an invitation. I'm just inviting them to take a next step. So my next step would be scheduling an assessment. I keep my assessment low cost so that it's easy for people to say yes. Okay. Talked a lot on that slide. Making it easy, here's the next step. Make it easy for people to say yes. The loss leader or irresistible offer, I just kind of mentioned that. I do have a Groupon out right now that people can come in for a reduced rate so that they can have the experience, see if it works for them before investing a lot of money. the try before you buy culture. Maybe there's different ways that you can give a small experience or a small first step before they're willing to invest in a bigger program. What is that next step? And then in that next step, that's where you can have even a more in-depth sales conversation. So that's how my process works. And you can map these things for your process as well. What is in that initial conversation? Now you can use this from your own experience. When you're talking with people on the phone, what are the questions that they have? What is the background information that you want to cover to see if they're a good profile or a good fit for you? And then what's that question that would invite them to the next step? So in the coaching industry, sorry, I'm just getting this back here. So in the coaching industry, at least when I started, it was very common for people to offer free sessions. The session would be an hour. They could experience coaching, see how it worked for them. So it's kind of that try before you buy. But why I don't like free sessions, I don't do free sessions anymore. When they're free, people don't show up. If they haven't committed at least a small amount of money to that session or that time, they have no responsibility to that. But if they are willing to commit even a small fee, $20, $25, now they're serious about it and they see it as an appointment and they're willing to keep that appointment, or they're prioritizing keeping that appointment, I should say. My experience with free coaching, I did when I first started, that was the sales process that I used, and I took someone through that free session, that free coaching session. Well, by the time we got to the end of the 45 minutes, she said, wow, this is great. You actually solved my problem. I don't need coaching anymore. I'm like, oh, great. Okay, I guess we'll chalk that up to community service, right? So in your in your first step, in your initial contact or conversation, you want to recognize what is their problem that you're helping them solve, but not really give them the full solution, right? You want to have that next step that you can illustrate how your product or service can move them forward. So the lady who said, yeah, you've solved my problem, I don't need a free session, could sessions actually have helped her in other ways? I'm sure that they could have or would have. But if she had the solution to the problem she had in the moment, she didn't want to purchase, right? Also with free sessions, there's kind of a free shopper mentality that people are shopping for the lowest price. I don't do that. I don't play that game in my business anymore. If you go to my website, you'll see a lot of information. You'll see me as the expert. I've been in this field 14 years versus I'm not just some hobby business that is doing this on weekends. This is a full-time thing for me. I've worked with thousands of clients, and I want people to bring that respect to our conversation, that they're not shopping. You know, if you're doing comparison shopping, you can find a lot of people who will do things cheaper, but they don't have my background, my expertise, and my unique processes that I've developed over the 14 years. So even, like I mentioned, the group on offer, if people are willing to pay even a low cost, they're more committed, they're often willing to pay. They're not just a free shopper seeing what they can get for free, but they're willing to invest in themselves and even a larger program, or the program that's going to fit them in their budget. So I encourage people to get away from free sessions, even if people are willing to pay $25 for a session. It can really weed out the people who are just free shopping, tire kickers, we often call them, people who are not really willing to commit to themselves, and also, you know, helping them be accountable with your time and prioritizing that appointment for you as well. So even if you offer a low cost introduction, it's much better than doing free. So that's my advice to hypnotherapists, coaches, NLP people. Get away from the free thing. And making it easy for people to say yes. So I offer a reduced initial rate on the initial session. That's kind of that try before you buy. Groupon is another place that people find me. For me, I see it as extra advertising. They're just getting the word out to other places. From that, I've had a lot of people that are like, this is the first weird thing I've ever tried. I've never done hypnosis before. Okay, let's see if we can take away, address that weird stigma and help you have a good experience with it and see the result. Classes, I do that more as community service. I'm dialing back some of my community classes and doing more trainings now. When clients pay for sessions and when clients pay even a small amount for a class or a session, there's an expectation of benefits. The free thing has been, oh yeah, come to this free class, but then it's just a pitch. They're not giving you value. But when people pay for a class, they're gonna show up. I often give a lot of value. Often I also give a hypnosis recording as well. So what do they get in the initial assessment? That's part of the value. In the initial contact with people, what are they gonna get in moving forward with you? And how can you increase the value? Sometimes there is, now we can talk about this perceived value. So perceived value is how people are kind of rating or ranking your product or service compared to someone else. And sometimes there's other pieces of the value that we're not mentioning. So do people get email support, or do they have a Facebook group support that can add to the perceived value? In your perceived value, is there you have a higher commitment to your customer, to your client? Are you more on time or more effective with your product or service? These are benefits that you would want to mention that then add to that perceived value. Okay, here's our action steps, and then we'll open up the lines and chat again. Action steps is creating your FAQ list for each program and package. So when you're really dialed in as to the terms, the conditions, the what ifs, there is a personality style that will ask all of the what ifs. There is a personality style that wants to know how things work together. But mostly people want to know the benefits. That's in the action steps too. So dial in your FAQ list. Know what that is and get really clear about what it is versus what it isn't and who you would refer to someone else. Know how and where you get leads. So just that conversation, and map that conversation for each of those places. So my email inquiry is a little different from the phone conversation, which is a little different than if people sometimes people just buy the initial assessment and then they show up to our first meeting, and that's our conversation. That's our session, is that session. Map the conversation for each of those and know your offerings and your prices. Just make sure they're dialed in, make sure they're clear. I like putting them on a page. People can easily see them. They often say, hey, can I take this with me? Can I think about it a few days? Benefits, benefits, benefits. Anytime that you're asking for the sale or asking for money, reiterate the benefits. What do they get in working with this? What do they get in changing this problem? What do they get in working with you or buying that program? And what's the easy first step? So you're going to line that out in your conversation as well. Through each of those conversations that you're having, what is that first step? And then practice your invitation so that it feels comfortable for you. And if it feels comfortable for you, it's going to feel comfortable for that person. And so these are the action steps. Go ahead and dial this in, get really clear, and keep in mind the benefits, benefits, benefits in working with you. That's also part of that attitude of being of service. That when you go, when you're contacting a new prospect, kind of imagine having that out in front of you is like this platter, this invitation that you're here to help. And here's all of these benefits kind of in front of you, right? It's kind of a visual from NLP. having that in front of you helps your mind recognize, oh, you are being of service. You are helping people connect with the solutions that they're working for, that they're looking for. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this and open up the lines to chat. And this replay will be available to people in the Business Profitability Program, or you can also get it through my website. If you have any questions, you can go to thebraintrainerllc.com. There's also on the Brain Trainer website, you'll also find under the business category, the drop down, there's you can get 47 marketing strategies free. A lot of business owners kind of struggle with how do you get the word out? How do you get those leads? How do you get people finding you and coming to you so that you can help them with their problems and help them move forward? All right, we're going to go ahead and stop the screen share.